Beep beep. What is up, guys? My name is Sam World, and today I am joined once again by Ssol, and we are also joined by a fisherman who's going to teach us how to fish. Nah, where are we
Fisherman
joined?
first. Fisherman first.
Yeah, fisherman first. We're joined by an awesome tech house producer, has recently been killing it, lots of dope tracks, and today he's here with us. His name is Westend. How are you doing,
Yo, yo,
brother?
yo. What's good? Thanks for having me. I'm super stoked to do this. I'm doing well. I'm not fishing right now, so I'm not doing as well as I can be, but I'm excited to do this with you guys. So.
Yeah, appreciate it, man. Again, I know you're going to give us tons of valuable information. But the first thing I want to ask so people know who you are is, what are you about? You got anything going on that you want to tell us about? Some releases that we should check out?
So I've been producing for around 10 years, kind of started in my bedroom as a high school kid, and it was just like a hobby that I fell in love with. And then in the last 3.5, 4 years, I've been doing it full time, making house and tech house. And yeah, this last year's been really good for me. Done some releases on labels like Repopulate Mars, Glasgow Underground, Insomniac Records. Had a bit of success on Beatport over those couple of those releases. I do have one more release coming out this year, which is going to be on Defected's D for Dance. It's titled Perfect. So that'll be my last single of the year, and I'm super stoked about that one. But yeah, just working on a lot of music for next year.
Awesome. And then you're also a YouTuber, right? I noticed you have some videos
Yeah,
out.
I did. During the pandemic, I kind of was like, had no shows. I was like, what else could I be doing to engage my fans? And I did a bunch of one-on-one production lessons, and then that kind of evolved into making some videos for YouTube. And like, I just really love explaining things to people, teaching people, and I find it's a great community over there. So yeah, you can check out my YouTube channel there. And I also have a Discord called Kick and Bass. So it's a monthly subscription fee, but we give feedback to you directly on your music. We have some guest coaches to record videos. We have a lot of content that's not on YouTube that's up there. So if you're, looking to invest in your tech house producer, you're looking to invest in some more content, some more feedback in a community, definitely recommend checking that out. It's www.kick-base.com.
Hey man, yeah. So with this track, do you want to give us a bit of an idea of how it came to be, what the sort of process was before we just get right into it?
Yeah, definitely. So the way this track came about was Kevin McKay, who's the owner of Glasgow Underground, which is the label that it was released on. He messaged me and he was like, "Hey, do you want to do a track for the label? Love your stuff." And I was like, "Yeah, I'm a big fan. Let's like make something happen." And so what he did is he actually sent me a Dropbox folder with a bunch of different acapellas that the label had used either in the past. I basically kind of just like went through them, and this one stuck out to me, like the famous Pink "Get This Party Started" one. And I was like, I haven't heard like tech house remix of this. I think this would like really kill it in my live set. So I kind of just took that acapella and then made this track over that. So it's almost kind of like a remix, but it was, we used the acapella as a sample.
So if we start with the kick and the bass on this track, was the bass,
Uh-huh.
as you say, influenced by? Did you repurpose some of the vocal? Do you want to sort of show us how that came about?
Yeah, I have the kick and bass usually in different groups. Some people like group them together. I like to have them in separate groups in Ableton. So it's actually 2 layers of a kick. This is a sample from Splice that looks like Toolroom Academy Mark Knight kick. This is kind of providing like the low end, has some tops. I'm just doing some EQing maybe to cut out a little bit of those highs. And then there's another layer, and this one kind of is like what I call like the knock kick. So it almost sounds like someone's like knocking at the door. You can see on this layer that we've taken out all the sub. Usually you don't want the sub of both kick layers to play at the same time. You can get like phasing issues, or it just doesn't sound as good. Also brought like the width down. Sometimes the kicks can be like pretty wide, these samples, and sometimes I want them to be a little bit more mono. So brought the width down here, but they kind of work together to create this like nice punchy kick. You take away the yeah.
Do you have any thoughts on where you phase the low kick out and bring the high kick in terms of like frequencies and things?
I don't get too like mathematical with it. I just kind of use my ears. Sometimes like the cutoff will be, you know, higher up if I want less of that kind of like mid bite. Sometimes it'll be lower down if I want that like punch and like like it looks like in this case it was like 284 hertz. That's more of just me kind of doing like a sweep around, but I don't get too mathematical with it. I just kind of use my ears there.
Do you mix the two samples together at all with any compression or anything like that?
Yeah, so like these two samples will go together to like a group up here, and then usually I'll do some type of EQing or like saturation to kind of like apply the same effect to both of them to gel them together. So here there's like a little bit of EQ. So if we like solo this, it's just a little bit too much like in the mids, a little bit too knocky. So kind of tames that down a little bit. And this is a plugin that like Chris like put out like a video like 2 years ago, and then like everyone grabbed this from his like tutorial. But it's just I like it because it's like easy. It's like a dry wet knob, and then there's just different presets. So if we turn this off, it's definitely adding a lot of volume to that kick, kind of like body. I think it does like some saturation or some compression in the back end, but that can help. Another trick is like like putting everything in mono under certain frequencies. So in Ableton, you have this bass mono. So just like making sure all those kind of like lows are in mono.
Awesome. So should we take a look at the bass then?
So yeah, for this track, the bass line, it's a 2-bar loop. So it's like really important, I feel like with tech house, to think about how long the phrase of your bass is. The longer it is, the more the emphasis goes on to the bass line melody. The shorter it is, like in techno, the less of an emphasis on like the melody of the bass line. And I feel like you have a lot more room in the track to use other elements. So in this track, like the bass is really like the main kind of centerpiece and focus. But what I did was I took this part of the vocal right here, and then in Ableton, if you copy an audio clip, you can convert it to MIDI. So I copied that into like the MIDI channel here, and I converted it to a melody. And Ableton doesn't always do an amazing job at this, but it's like usually pretty on point. So this is like the melody that Ableton picked from that. All right, so it's not perfect, but you can kind of like get all the notes. The vocal is kind of following. So I knew for the bass line, because I'm gonna have the vocal and the bass play together, I need something that's gonna like work with each other. So you can kind of hear like coming up, and then like it kind of goes off it a little bit because I don't want it to be the exact same melody, but it's like enough influence where like there is this kind of continuity between the different elements. You know, another like important thing is to like look at note length variation. So if every note in your bass line is like the same length, like an 8th note or 16th note, a lot of times that bass line can get kind of boring. So what I did here was I just like modified some of the note lengths. Like to start it off, it's like a longer held note. Then we have like some faster notes towards the end of it, like a faster rhythm. So that's some important stuff you can do. You can also see some of these notes like aren't perfectly on the grid. Like this like D right here, I kind of like manually added some swing to it so it doesn't hit, you know, right on time. That can help to make your bass line not sound as robotic. Looking at the patch itself, so this is like the main bass, and this, I believe, I got this from like a remake of like a Martin Eichen song. So like there's a website called Top Music Arts, and these guys remake popular songs. So a lot of times what I'll do is like I'll go buy the project file and just kind of save down the Ableton instrument rack with like the bass line, because it's just like a simple clean bass line that I like. So it looks like this sub is a sawtooth wave with like a low pass filter, very simple. And this is like the envelope that's there, pretty short envelope. I think this is on the volume, maybe I'm wrong, but yeah, so this is going into the saturator. So let me like turn off all this processing. So yeah, without it. So yeah, this saturator is definitely adding like a lot of volume to it. So around 4 dB volume from the saturation, 100% dry wet. This EQ is doing a lot. So it's basically taking out anything that's kind of above, I don't know, 300 hertz, and it creates this really like warm kind of sound to the bass line, which I find very like pleasing. Especially like, you want to think about, a lot of times people talk about having a lot of mids on your bass line so that you can kind of hear them on like an iPhone or a laptop. And I think that's super important. But at the same time, if you have too many mids, they can kind of get in the way of other sounds in your track that are going to be in the mid frequencies. So kind of like knowing whether your bass line is going to play more of like a sub roll and like be behind the scenes, or if it's going to be more up front, and then kind of like using an EQ to emphasize that decision. Compressor, I don't really know if this is doing anything. Looks like a little bit of gain reduction, like a dB, just to flatten it out. I find with like bass lines, especially like if you're making club music, you don't really want too much variation in the volume of the different notes, because then like certain parts of the song, it'll just sound way better in the club and fuller, and then in other parts it won't. So trying to like kind of equalize that volume either with a compressor or like manually adjusting it can be nice. And then for sidechain, I'm like a big fan of like volume sidechain. So here we have the famous, I think you remember Kickstart. I don't really use Kickstart that much anymore. I use more LFO Tool or like Shaperbox, because you get a little bit more control with like drawing in these curves, and you can do multi-band sidechain, which is kind of cool. But I think for this, we just have some nice volume automation. But yeah, that's the main bass line. And then there's another bass here, which is kind of like the mid layer. So I'll play these together. So yeah, this is, I believe, the same patch. So I kind of like I just duplicated this in Ableton, and then I just made some slight adjustments to this. Like I think I had the filter open a lot. The envelope that's controlling this filter here, yeah, I think it opens up a little bit on a higher cutoff than this one, so to allow in more higher frequencies. Yeah, like this one, it doesn't look like there's any movement on the filter really. And yeah, so I didn't want like a sound that was going to be too different than the original. I wanted something that's going to kind of be in the same lane. And so I opened up the cutoff a little bit more. I did a little bit of different EQing here as well. So you can see it's a pretty restrictive EQ, but I find that this is really nice for mid layers, because if you don't have it, it's going to like, just like adds a little bit too much. It adds like this nice kind of like hollow sound, which I think is nice for a layer, because you already have a really good bass. I think I like for the breakdowns of the track, you can see that I take it out. So that's like a good arrangement tip, is to, if you have multiple layers to any sound, you don't always have to have those layers playing throughout the track. You can use the layer as a way to progress the arrangement, as opposed to always having it there. All my drums kind of go into this one drums bus. The drums usually consist, for me and my tracks, of like a clap, hats, which include like a main kind of open hat, some shakers and like top loops, and then some like percussion, sometimes like some fills and snares. So let's just start with the clap. I usually layer my claps when I work on them. I find that a lot of the productions that are out there and the ones that are, doing super well on Beatport and get a lot of DG support, those guys are probably layering their claps. And so to kind of keep up, you have to layer your claps to get this like full wide sound. So usually when I'm thinking about layering, I'm thinking about, does this layer add width to the sound? So does it add a bigger stereo image, or does it add frequencies that aren't in the original samples? And the cool thing about this clap is, or like the loop, is that it has some kind of character claps already built into it. So if you look at the beginning, there's like a snare, and then there's like a little quiet clap right here. And I find that nice because it helps to add some groove. Like a lot of these stuff are kind of like off the grid, and a lot of times the clap can just feel really flat if it's just the 2 and the 4 every single time. So finding places to do double claps or like little accentuated claps can really help. There's 2 other claps that are kind of like working with this one, and you can see that these claps are panned hard right and hard left. Yeah, this one's on the right, that one's on the left, and what I'm basically trying to achieve here is something called the Haas effect. So if you delay a sound slightly in your left and right ear, you can create this really wide sound there. So if you see, I have this 2 millisecond delay going in Ableton, and that kind of creates that Haas effect. So if I play these together, you get this like really wide clap. And these claps are sitting much quieter than the main ones, so they're not really there to be up front. They're more just to add some width to the overall sound. You can see it creates like this really big wide clap that I find for tech house is nice, because a lot of times you don't have a lot going on in the mids. You have like your kick bass and your hats. So to have like a nice wide clap, there's usually a lot of room for that. We have this layer. It's kind of like a chant, and you can see I've like used the audio fades to get rid of the transient here, because I don't really want the transient of this sound to fight with the transients of these sounds. And I think that's just to provide some emphasis on like every fourth clap. So just again, to add some complexity to the track. I find that this is the kind of stuff that separates a little bit like the intermediates from the pros. Another thing here is like you can see these all go to like my clap bus, and on my clap bus we have Fab Filter Saturn. There's a preset in here. If you go to best of basic saturator, the producer Sid showed me this, and I do it on like every track. But for some reason, this preset sounds really nice on claps. Some EQing, you know, claps, you don't really, because they're going to play on the same note as the kick, you really don't want any low end from that, because then it's going to fight with the kick. So cutting all that out, adding a little bit of top mid frequencies here. This is a really cool plugin. It's a free plugin. It's just more of like a monitoring one. But what I really like about this is it allows you to isolate your stereo and your mono. So what you can do is you can mute the stereo. So basically you can listen to your clap in mono, see how it sounds. And then the other thing you can do is you can mute the mono and listen to the stereo. So now you're just listening to the stereo component of the clap. So if you wanted to figure out how loud that is for your clap, or if you really have any stereo width to your clap, you could kind of mute the mono and just check to see what it sounds like in stereo. And then like, let's say you thought it was a little bit too loud, you can turn down the gain here. So this is like a great free plugin from Voxengo that I use. And then here, this is pretty important. So if you don't have any reverb on your drums, they're going to sound very dry, like they don't exist in a certain room. That's what reverb does. It kind of places sounds into different listening environments. And so I find that in tech house, it's really nice to have like a little bit of a short reverb on your clap. It just kind of helps to glue together the different samples that you could be using, and it also adds some nice like frequencies to it. So the way I do this is like a parallel reverb. So we have one chain with no effects on it, one chain with a reverb on it, and the reverb's pretty short decay time, around 517 milliseconds. So if I solo this for you guys, it's very quiet. I can bring this up a little bit. So that's the reverb. It's 100% dry wet. So every time you do something in parallel, you want the dry wet to be 100%. And then what I did here was I actually automated this decay time on the reverb, so that every fourth clap is a little bit longer, so that there's this kind of like emphasis on the fourth beat. Endless Smile, this is a great build-up effect plugin. Sometimes it's like a lot of times people will put Endless Smile on their whole drums group, which I think is nice, but sometimes it's nice to add like reverb and delay to just like one of the sounds and keep the other ones clean. So if we listen right here, you can kind of hear like all the other drums are pretty dry, but just the clap is getting this like reverb. And sometimes it's nice to have the contrast of like the washy clap with like the clean hat. Sound here is like a skippy hat. I don't know why I didn't put this in the hat group, but this just helps add a lot of groove. Nothing is really like on the beat. Everything's kind of off the grid, and it provides like a nice little pattern. It's a skippy hat, a little bit of EQ, pan this a little bit to the left so that not all the drums are fighting for space in the center. And then we go to the hats bus, so I'll solo that for you guys. So a lot of different hat layers for the same effect as the clap, just to get different frequencies in there and like different width levels, stereo imaging. So this is like one of the layers, kind of like 9 on 9, a little softer, maybe not, it felt like softer of a transient on it a little bit. Another kind of 909 based one. So this one's definitely different than the other two. This one has like a lot more brightness to it. So you can see with the EQ, it kind of brought that down. But if I take like this layer out and I add it back in, it just sounds a little bit duller without it in there. It's like pretty minor, but it really does help to kind of add some overall like energy and excitement. There's like a transient. So this one's like a little bit lower. Probably could have done some better EQing. I can hear a little bit of like bass in this, but that's to add just a nice attack to the hat. So when I'm thinking about hats, the three things I'm kind of thinking of are like a transient to give it that like bite and like crispiness. Sometimes a shaker layer to kind of add that like chuff sound, like that can help to make it sound a lot more full in the mids, and then some like metallic brightness from like a 909 to give it that kind of like overall tech housey kind of sound.
I remember, I think I saw one of your videos for I forget which track it was. I think it's your track that's doing really well in Beatport right now. But you talked quite a lot about working with the transients of lots of different hats, maybe with transient shapers or just ducking some of those frequencies where that transient was, so you weren't sort of stacking a lot of transients on top of each other. And I thought that was really interesting. I'm not sure how much you go into it on this track, but
yeah, it depends on like how lazy I'm feeling at the time. But if whenever you're layering like samples, you can kind of like zoom in and like start to see how the transients of each one kind of look. So these ones, they all kind of have pretty heavy transients. Like they, as soon as the sample starts, there's like a lot of volume. There's no kind of fade in, but like you can see this one, it has like a little bit of a fade in until the volume gets louder. So when you're like layering hats, if you have a lot of loud transient layers kind of all playing at once, it can either cause the kind of bus channel to like clip a bit because all that volume's kind of, the waves are adding on each other and you're getting this really loud sound. So sometimes it's good to either like, I think in this case, I put like maybe a limiter. Yeah, so you can see I have this like limiter on the bus, and that's just to make sure that it doesn't peak above 0 dB or like clip too much. So yeah, all these hats go to this like main hat group. We have the same type of like reverb here that I use on the clap, and then EQing and that limiter I talked about. So yeah, just a little shaker loop. And like one thing to notice here is like this shaker loop isn't present for the whole drop. Like if I open it up, you can see it only kind of comes in after 8 bars. So, you know, it's important to think about drum progression and how different drums are going to come in and out throughout your track to create this like movement in your track. So I don't always have all my drums start at the beginning of my drops. A lot of times I'll wait like 8 bars or 16 bars to bring in some of those like higher energy drums, like a ride or a shaker. So we have that there. Yeah, these all go to like this hats bus here. And then on the hats bus, some more EQing. So like this is just kind of glue everything together. You can hear without that EQ, there's a lot more like kind of like low mid, so it kind of tames that down a little bit. Same thing here, you can check how wide your hats are. So pretty wide. That still sounds good in mono. And then here like a little couple secrets that I use in my tracks. So SSL channel from Waves. There is a preset that I really like, EDM hi-hats. For some reason, I don't know if I didn't have this on here, maybe I didn't, but it adds this like nice character to your hats. It's basically, there's like a boost around, a really heavy dB boost at like 1.7 hertz. And usually I bring this down because 7.5 is like a lot to boost in one frequency. But I find that this area where we're this 1.7 hertz, you can do this with an EQ as well. You don't need this plugin. It just adds like this nice kind of bite to the hats. So a lot of times like I'll put this on and like bring this down a bit.
Yeah, I think I remember when we had Fab Massimo on, he did a similar boost around 1.5, and he says because brings out some of that like housey resonance and without having to boost the whole hat, so it sort of saves on volume but brings out what you need. So it's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
It's two different ways of getting to the same sort of result.
Yeah. I find that like if you do this boost kind of on the bus, it gels everything together because like all those like different samples that you layered and like top loops, they kind of are all getting this same kind of colored EQ. So it can be really nice. And then this is like the best plugin ever made, in my opinion, Soothe. So kind of detects resonance on the fly as the track is moving along. And a lot of times when you have those like 909 hats, and you kind of play a bunch at the same time, you can get some gnarly resonance. So what I do is I put this on, and you can see it's starting to duck in certain areas. So if I turn it off, it's pretty subtle, but it's a lot, it's like the same sound without that harshness to it. The next sound would be like percussion. So it depends on like the style of track you're making. For like my stuff, for my tracks, I don't have a lot of like kind of very percussive sounds going on, like a loop almost, like bongos, congos, like that's not really like my style. So for me, I use percussion more as like one shots. So it's just kind of like add ear candy every once in a while, or like fill in the gaps. Yeah, you can see it's mostly like one shots that are kind of just coming in every once in a while. And it's more about like the call and response phrase. So a lot of times the percussion works with the call and response. So yeah, like this sound right here, it's a little kind of 90s DJ reverse scratch. And this is coming right at the end of like a 2-bar phrase. So like right as that synth ends, you kind of get a little bit of that percussion. So it kind of helps to round off that call and response. Same thing here. So like this is like a little, I don't know, just looping some weird percussion stuff and like a cowbell kind of sound. And that comes at the end of this phrase. Like, get the energy going right before the phrase resets, the call and response resets. So this is kind of stuff that I figure you can do after you get the main kind of hook of your track, is like go into those areas and find like interesting sounds to round off those sections and to add ear candy. And like I'm just on Splice, I'm going through stuff, I'm going through like sample packs. There's no kind of like rhyme or reason. It's like whatever I think could sound cool in that moment. Yeah, so this is like percussion. And then all of this stuff, like the clap, the percussion, the hats, they all go up to this drum bus. And I'm not trying to do too much processing here because we're dealing with sounds that have like totally different like frequencies and like stereo widths. So if you start to do like a ton of like compression or like a ton of EQing here, I find that like you start to lose dynamics in your track. And this is something that I think a lot of people do wrong, is that they just put like a big compressor that does like 5 dB gain on their drum bus, and then there's no like volume difference, there's no dynamics left. So like what I do is I have this plugin from Thermal. I don't know if this is like reset, but I usually use this overhead slam. You can see it's got this star, the lonely star. This overhead slam preset. And what it does, this is a saturation plugin from Thermal. It's like $100, one of my favorite plugins. And this preset, it adds like a ton of width and I guess this crush kind of feeling. So what I'll do is like, I'll turn the dry wet down to like 10% around there. And then I'll solo this off. It adds like the crush adds this kind of nice like bit crush like analog like vibe to it, and then like the width adds just a ton of width to your drums. So I usually have this on and I find that it helps the drums to kind of come together a little bit more and add some more life to it. So yeah, I use that a lot. And the smile just for like build up sections. Same thing with like filtering. Like sometimes I like to filter all the drums down. That's another thing I feel like people in tech house do that's a little bit boring, is like they kind of just have their drum loop going the entire track and they don't make any variation to it. So like a breakdown is a great place to use some filtering to change your drums. Like here it's kind of coming down. Like those drums are still there, but if I didn't have that filter, it would just feel like a lot more kind of amateurish in my opinion. It's more of a preference thing, but yeah.
I like how
yeah,
your filter
the drums.
is going up as she's saying, "I'm coming up."
I'm
That's right.
coming.
Exactly, right? You can play some word puns in there, you
Yeah.
know.
So I have a student recently, and I had to ask about the vocals just because he has this damn rack called Westend Vocals 1 point something, and he uses it on everything. So with that being said, yeah, there it is.
This bad
Why,
boy.
why don't we go into the vocals, the way you process them? I'm assuming that the vocals were already processed when you got them from the Glasgow guys.
Yeah. So yeah, when I got the vocal stem, the acapella, I think they added some processing in the recording because it did sound really good off the bat. So I don't have that much going on. I mean, I'll kind of go through what these are all doing. So let me just like group these. Cool. So yeah, this is like the vocal.
I'm coming up, so you better get this party started.
And then I'm gonna turn this off and play it again.
I'm coming up, so you better get this party started.
So yeah, what I'm kind of trying to achieve with like the vocal processing here is a little bit of width to give the vocal just a lot more space in the mix. So it really kind of, when you hear it, it feels like it's taking you over a little bit. So like width can really help with that. I'm trying to add some like reverbs and delays to make it not sound so dry. And that's pretty much it. This is a plugin I got from a Disclosure video. I think they broke down one of their tracks and they said they used this, and I just kind of like blindly bought it. But it's kind of like an exciter plugin, and I just use this go-to lead vocal preset, and I find that it helps to add some volume and like some nice kind of like buzz to the vocal. So definitely adding volume. But I think there's some algorithm or something going on with this like model, some old compressor that it just makes it sound a little bit nice. But this is like that 3%, 5% of getting it there. It's really not that important. EQ, just make sure there's no sub by accident. Sometimes when people record on a mic, you ever listen to like a YouTube video with like headphones, you can feel sub, like you know, tons of mics pick up subs. So just double checking that there's no sub there.
The podcast voice.
Podcast, exactly. Or like fishing videos, because like people are out at sea and like the wind is going crazy and the boat's rocking. Like I watch a lot of fishing YouTube, so yeah, they need to get their mic set up. Yeah, this Westend vocals rack, it's honestly, I cannot take too much credit for this because I took this from Reed Stefan, I think that's how you say his name, the puppet man on YouTube. He had like a video of like how to process vocals, like when I first started using vocals, and it's like very similar to this. It's basically parallel processing, so you have tons of different layers and you kind of use the volume on 100% dry wet on these effects to mix that in with like your dry ones. So like the dry vocal is just, then he's got two different compressed versions, a flanger, a slap delay, two different reverbs, and then two different delays. And you can see that they're all set at different volumes, and you can kind of customize this. So like if on your track you don't want the reverb to be as loud, you can bring that down, you can bring it up. There's some nice panning going on as well. So I'll just kind of quickly run through these, but like very compressed layer. Another like super compressed, pretty much like limited compressed layer. Flanger, which is kind of cool. So it has like that phasey kind of ness to it. Slap delay. Short reverb. Long reverb. And then like half note delay. And then this delay, I think it's like a filter delay. But yeah, basically you can get like a rack like this or make it yourself, and you can add whatever plugins or like effects you like or mute these. But it's just a really great starting point. And I use this on synths as well a ton because it'll add a lot of width and reverb and delay like very quickly. So yeah, this is like usually it makes it louder, but it really adds like that wetness to it. So when you pause it, you still hear some of those stuff. And then, yeah, that's pretty much it. Then just like a filter for automation, but not much processing on the vocal because it did sound really good when I got it. So like when you have a really good vocal like this is like the centerpiece of the track. This is like the main chorus. So when I'm coming up with like ear candy ideas and like synth ideas, I'm trying to create this cohesiveness in the track. So I'm not trying to use like too many sounds that I like that, you know, sample sounds or like new synths. I'm trying to like repurpose stuff I already have. So if we look here, I just like found like some vowels in like the vocal and kind of like used it. So I think this part, like if we listen, so it's like the coming, like it's like somewhere in there, and then I just kind of, you know, chopped it up. I'm not doing like any crazy rhythms as well. It's kind of like offbeat little stuff, but you know, it leads nicely into that like vocal fill. Another thing is like people, they'll use the vocal for the track and they'll only use one vocal the whole track. So it's like one little loop from Splice. And I think people are like scared to use other vocal sounds with it because they don't come from the same source. But for me, that can sound really nice. So like this is like something from the Blanc sample pack, Sounds of Blanc, and it's like a little like vocal glitch, but it's nice to kind of have like complementing vocals with the main one. Like another great example is like John Summit, Make Me Feel. He's got like the Make Me Feel female vocal, and then like in the drop, he's got that like What You've Been Doing, like pitch down really low. And it's nice to have like those contrasts. So don't be afraid
Is that
to.
what it says? I've wondered what it says.
I think
like...
it is. I think it's like What You've Been Doing or something like that. I don't know. I think he recorded it, but it's like yeah, it's just like the contrast between different vocals. Sound nice. Drop, I have some slight side chain on the vocal because now like we have the kick and all these drums, so I kind of want the vocal to be a little bit more like bouncy here as opposed to in the breakdown where it can be more of like euphoric. So yeah, a little bit of side chain can help on your vocals in the drop.
I'm coming up, so you better get this.
Not that much, but just like a little bit of volume reduction. Synths for this track, there's not many synths. I would say there's like 3 or 4. And usually the way I deal with synths is maybe there's like a main lead synth and then there's like ear candy synths that are there just to, you know, give you a little bit of flavor here and there. So for the main synth for this track, it's a technique that I use a lot with like an arpeggiator. So if we look here, it's a serum patch and it's, I think, from Future Raves or Serum. So I'm not making future rave music, but it's sometimes nice to use other genres synth patches to, you know, maybe create your own sound. So it's kind of like a pluck sound here, and I'll play it for you guys so you can listen. Okay, so yeah, it's basically just one MIDI note. So I'm taking like the root note of the key that I'm working in, which is the key of B. I'm just drawing one long MIDI note. And then what you do is, you can do this with any sound, but it works really well with like plucks. You put an arpeggiator on it and you switch this arpeggiator from sync to free mode. So now it's not tied up to the BPM. And then you kind of just play around with like some automation to get a sound that you like. So you can kind of see that it's getting faster, 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 and then it kind of reaches this like peak point where it's really fast. The notes are playing 11 milliseconds apart, and then it kind of slows down. And I'll show you guys what I'm doing here as well. But and then the other thing that's going on, so I'm doing a little bit of math here. So if you go to Google, you can go type in any kind of BPM to millisecond converter, and what that'll do is you can type in the BPM of your track and then whatever pattern you want. So let's say you want like an eighth note pattern, and it'll spit out a number at you, like 175. So what you could do is like you can find patterns and you can kind of have them flow nicely into it. So you'll see is that this is not really on the beat during the buildup, and then as soon as the drop hits, it kind of switches over and you get this pattern that's kind of in sync with the rest of the song. So let me play that for you guys. So yeah, I use that here, and then I think I even slowed it down by half of this. So like 175 divided by 2 is around somewhere around 350. So like for the second half, let's play this. Yeah, so like this time it goes even slower and it kind of ends up where it started the first time. So that's like really the only synth in the track. There is a couple other like synth sounds which I'll show you, like this. It's just like a serum Did you make this? Yeah, I think you made this, Zen World. Yep, you did. It's a fucking full circle moment right now. Yeah, I used a lot of your shit. So yeah, just a little like square wave, kind of one shot. And like when I'm thinking about synths, I'm thinking like, what do I already have? So I have like this really fast, like plucky thing. So like, I don't want another fast plucky thing. I want something that's like different. So like a one shot or like a stab or like a respace, like something to kind of like contrast with that. The only other synth is this one up here.
Yeah, that one's really nice.
Yeah, it's dope.
Yeah, I think I got lucky with the sound because it sounds really good, and yeah, I just got lucky with finding it and processing it. But yeah, so this is like the same thing as I did with the bass line. So I use like the vocal to create this MIDI. So if you look at the sound, it's just B, C, D. So it's kind of like coming up, something like that. Yeah, it looks like 2 square waves. What is this? The pulse wave or something?
Yeah, each pulse.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's like a pulse and a square wave, and there's like a filter, envelopes affecting the filter, creating this pluck sound, but I'm opening up this filter as the sound goes up, and then I'm bringing it down. So if I turn this automation off, it's still kind of cool, but with the automation, kind of like lifts you up and then brings you back. Yeah, I think filter automation, filter cutoff automation, like if I had to pick like one thing that I had to do for the rest of my life, like it would be that. Like it's, you can do so much with just a filter and bringing in frequencies and bringing them out. And I think I try to do that with as many sounds as possible. So yeah, this kind of comes in right before the drop as like a synth kind of fill, and it comes in at different points of the track as well. Like looks like 6 times I used in the track. So not like overbearing, but definitely coming in every once in a while. And then processing, yeah, I think there's a lot of processing here. So let's just like quickly go through it. Yeah, so heavy EQing here. So who's emphasizing like where it's already there. Some weird curve. I've never really used something like this. I wonder if I got this from someone else or something. But sometimes you get funky with the EQ. You can get some very like defining sounds in your synth. So don't be afraid to like really shove things up. A lot of times you like look back, you're like, I have no idea why I did this. So sometimes it's hard to remember. But yeah, so this is Ableton's own kind of amp, which I don't use that often, but I think this is like really effective. Like a lot of guys use this, and I think I need to use it more. But it's a pretty low, dry, wet, so you're not gonna really hear much difference. But like I think if I crank this up, it's giving that like buzziness to it a little bit. So yeah, there's that Haas effect for some width. So this is like some other rack I have, but you can see this the left to right duplicated, and they're probably detuned from each other. Yeah, with a delay. Let me move this over so we can hold on, see this better. Yeah, it looks like there's a delay with like 12 millisecond delay on the left channel. So yeah, some weird reverb.
Yeah, the hybrid.
I think like this, I made this track when like I got like the new Ableton, so I probably was trying to use this hybrid reverb, but yeah, just again, parallel reverb. I want to keep the original sound clean, and I just want to have that reverb in the background. So that's what that's doing. Endless smile as well. This is pretty important for the sound because this synth sound is like coming right before the drop, and so if I don't have any like long reverb or like delay at the end of it, it's going to be kind of sudden when the sound ends and the next one comes in. So adding some endless smile to the end of the sound to kind of bleed into the next section can be nice. Yeah, effects, like nothing crazy. I think it's important to have a wide variety of different effects. Like you don't want to just use the same one up sweep and one down sweep in your whole track because it'll get boring really quickly. So just like finding like effects at different lengths that you're going to put in different areas. So like, you know, here's a little short like up sweep, and then like for like the build-ups, I have like other noise sounds. Let's see what this is. You got like down sweep, different style down sweep. So like, yeah, if you already have like one white noise down sweep, no real point, in my opinion, of having like 3 other like white noise ones. You may try for something that's like a little bit more like pitchy or like glitchy or something like that, so that they kind of, same thing with like claps, like you want to have different frequencies. The other thing I would say with like effects is like for tech house, it's nice to have some of these up sweeps and down sweeps to have some side chain on them so that they kind of pump with the kick. So I have like a group here, and then I put anything that I want with side chain in this group, kind of set up one side chain for everything. And then I have some that I don't have that side chain that are kind of like outside of there. Little like noise one shot. See, I actually did like a decent amount of processing on this. Like I used the wider to make this noise like really wide right when it hits you, and then some delay so that it doesn't just like end suddenly. Kind of has that ping pong delay right there.
So just any general comments about how you arranged this track out and how you kept it progressing?
Yeah, so like this track, the main hook of it is this, get this party started. Right?
I'm coming up, so you better get this party started.
And like that's the only vocal that I have, is like that 4-bar kind of loop. There's like no other part of the vocal that I really can use. So I have to find a way to like make this vocal interesting for like a 5-minute track or whatever it is. So a lot of it like has to do with like looping and being like strategic about where you're gonna put the vocal in. So you can see like for the first start of like this breakdown, I don't have the get this party started. I just have this coming up kind of like looped with a filter here. So
I'm coming up, so you. I'm coming up, so you.
So a lot of like teasing of vocals in certain sections. I use a lot of that for the arrangement. So like kind of teased it in this like intro, and then we get the full vocal here. And then, you know, you've already, the listeners listened to this vocal for like 30 seconds by now. So like when I start the drop, I'm not trying to start it with the vocal again, because you've already listened to it for 30 seconds. So, you know, I use like the first 8 bars of the drop as like the synth call and response section here. And then, you know, that goes on. And then like after 8 bars, I feel like, okay, now I can bring the vocal back because we haven't heard it for at least like 8 bars. So like then I get rid of a lot of this like synth stuff, and I let the vocal kind of just like ride.
I'm coming up, so you better get this party started.
You know, so like that goes for 8 bars, and then it's like I'm gonna do another 8 bars with it. I have to do something differently here, because if not, then it's just gonna get like repetitive. So I think what I did here was, I'm gonna say probably add like a ride. Actually, I don't think I did it right. I think I had these bass one shots that we went over. I used them a little bit more aggressively here, but like it's something subtle. It's like you don't notice it too much, but it does help to like kind of bring the energy. So yeah, like for me, it's like every 8 bars, do something a little bit different, have some new fills. So that's kind of how I design like the build up into the drop. And then like the rest of the arrangement, I want to keep it familiar, but I don't want to do the exact same thing that I did the first time. So we have this little like cool down section here where it's just the kick and the bass. So I forgot about this. There's a little trippy like cowbell sound.
Move. Tension.
So yeah, tension, like teasing the vocal, like even a shorter loop than I did before. So it's just that kind of vowel sound being looped. And then like here, it's the same idea as before. It's like, here's the vocal, but before you kind of have like the drums in the background. You can see that they're being filtered, but they're there. This time around is like more like euphoric kind of hands in the air, where there's no drums, and I'm kind of like rebuilding the beat from scratch. So like,
I'm coming up, so you better get this party started.
and like I'm thinking here as like a DJ as well. It's like I know I'm gonna play this track in my sets, and I know other people are, and this is like the moment like on the dance floor where like people can stop dancing and they can kind of like sing along for a bit. And like here, for example,
I'm coming up, so you better get this party started.
This is the section where I get to like do this with my hands and like clap, you know what I mean? So it's like you kind of want to think about like how your tune is going to work on the dance floor, because at the end of the day, most of this music is like club focused music. So if you can get it, you know, really effective in the dance floor and there's no kind of filler space, then you're going to get a lot more like support on your music. So yeah, I just kind of like rebuild the beat from scratch here. So like have a little fill. Like this is a nice thing I probably found on Splice. I don't know, very just kind of energetic. And you know, sometimes I look for fills in key with my song. Not that this really has a key to it, but like if there is some element that is pitched, it's nice to have it really be in key. So like it says B minor. So yeah, I look for some stuff in key and yeah, rebuild the beat. I have these like kick one shots too. So like sneak a little bit of low end energy in there so that they kind of don't forget that that exists. And then it goes to this section.
I'm coming up, so you I'm coming up, so you I'm coming up, so you better get this party started.
So this is kind of like a copy and paste to the first time around, but I think there's like some slight differences. Like, first of all, there's a snare roll that didn't exist before. So that's what this little snare roll is there. So, you know, sometimes I don't use my snare roll in each build up. I'll kind of only use it for one to give it more energy. And then for the effects here, it sounded like there's like a noise that lasts like a lot longer. Yeah. So like this is the noise from before. And then in the second drop, if we look here, it's like da, 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 it kind of like comes back in. So it's just like, how can I make this slightly different from before, but still kind of have the same vibe? And yeah, then the track I think pretty much repeats itself. The vocal comes back in, it progresses a little bit, and then goes to an outro. So for me, it's like, don't waste any time in your arrangement. Like every section should have like a purpose. If it's just feels like you're adding a section just for the sake of it, just to like make your track longer, it's like you kind of want to like rethink why you're adding that section in the first place.
Obviously, with tech house at the moment, if you want to stay hot, you got to release tracks pretty frequently. It seems like at the moment, it's like a lot of guys are thinking like once a month or once every month and a half or that sort of thing. So how do you stay as productive as possible in your writing sessions without getting too templatey?
I think it's nice to have a template to like work off of, but you just, while you're writing, have to be extra aware of like any kind of habits that you fall into, because like tech house is a very formulaic genre, or it can be, where it's like you can, I feel like I could design like an AI robot to make a tech house track, because like you just know that there's certain sounds and samples that you're going to use and there's certain arrangements. So I think it's like, as a producer, you just need to be aware of any habits that you start doing, and you know, try to break those every once in a while, whether it's like you're doing the same exact arrangement every track, maybe, you know, you can use the same sounds, but try to do it in a different arrangement. A lot of times like automation can help with this, because if you do some funky automation, you may end up, you know, using sounds in your track and trying to create like a new kind of flow of them. So I would say, yeah, just be like super aware of any habits, and just try to like switch it up when you can.
Making tracks to play at clubs versus making tracks to stream, is that something that ever sort of comes into your mindset at all when you're making tracks? And if so, do you ever make tracks that you think, okay, this is going to be good in the club, or this is going to be good in Spotify, and do you make any sort of decisions based on that?
Yeah, I think for me personally, I kind of made the move at the start of like 2020 that like I didn't want to only be a club focused producer. Like I knew I'm just gonna make electronic music and like mostly club oriented music, but like I think in the last couple of years, a lot of club people are listening to like house and club kind of music on Spotify. So there's that natural kind of like, I want to listen to party music whenever, at the gym, at home. But like for me personally, you know, I think about whether a song is going to be more underground focused or like kind of electronic focused, and like usually it just comes down to simple things like stuff that's more melodic usually streams better and works better. Stuff with like vocals definitely, and that's something that I'm like trying to get into, is like having a nice balance. Like some guys that I really respect that do both are like Sonny Federa and like MK. Like they make kind of club bangers, but they also make stuff that's a little bit more like chill and that you could listen to. So I think it just really depends on the type of artist that you want to be. And there's some guys that only do stuff for the club, but I find that most people kind of dabble in both worlds a little bit nowadays.
Okay, my last question is, I know you've got a YouTube channel and a Discord called Kick and Bass that you touched on at the start of the stream. Can you just tell us a little bit about what you get up to there and how it all sort of works?
Yeah, so my YouTube, I don't have that much stuff on there. I have two making a track from scratch videos. So I kind of make a tech house song from either scratch or from like a really small loop, and I try to do it in under an hour. So I kind of cover a bunch of different techniques that I use, and those are great if you're kind of like want to get into the genre and want to see how a track can get made. I also have like a track breakdown on my YouTube, and then on Kick and Bass. So what Kick and Bass is, it's a subscription service, and you pay a monthly fee. We have a couple different price points depending on the level of feedback that you want, and this label program, which I'll get to in a second. But basically the way it works is you pay a monthly fee, you get access to the Discord. We have around 300, close to 300 members at the moment. And in the Discord, we have links to videos from myself and other guest coaches. So we had like Black V-Neck come in and do a track breakdown, and they went through a lot of amazing like mixing techniques. I have tons of videos on like little shorter videos like snare rolls, drum layering, bass lines, and this is all kind of like oriented on tech house. So you get access to the Discord, you get access to all these videos. Almost all my track breakdowns are in there, as well as like project files. So you can actually get the Get This Party Started project file in my Discord. I have that available. And that's one component of it. The second component is feedback. So me and another producer, Moose, M-U-U-S, we give feedback to all of the premium and standard members of the Discord. So if you want like 5 to 10 bullet point notes on specifically directed on like what I think you could be doing better in your track, you just DM it to me in the Discord and I get back to you. And we have an option for 2 or 5 feedbacks a month. And then we have like a bunch of discounts for members in there. We do giveaways. There's a label program for premium members as well, which is pretty cool, which is basically we had a deal with a bunch of different labels. And if I think your song is strong enough, I'll directly send it to like the A&R, the label, and you're much more likely to get a listed or a check signed when you kind of have a direct in. So that's something we just launched. But yeah, it's a really great community. The best part is definitely the community. Everyone in there is like a tech house producer. They're all trying to get better at making tech house. So yeah, it's a dope community we have.
All right, Westend. So thank you so much for coming on. And guys, make sure to check out Kick and Bass and Westend's productions. I'll make sure to leave links in the description down below for all of that. With that being said, thank you guys for watching In the Dojo with Westend today. And I'll see you guys next time for another video. Peace.